All right, I'm going to get started at least with the reminders that we are in Core Concepts Part B, and this is the introduction to the 2024 MCAS-Alt. I am Deborah Hand. I'm with the department. I'm here with Kevin Froten, who is our contractor through Cognia. I'm also here with our teacher consultants, and we have some training specialists as well that are on this call. Our training specialists are volunteers that we spend a day or at least a half a day with and talk about things that we do during the review sessions. These are people that are very experienced in doing the alternate assessment, and we appreciate the time they give us, because we could not do our review sessions without them. So just a couple of reminders of from this morning. We're going to hold the questions until the end on this one because we're going to go over quite a bit, and it just takes away from your understanding if you're asking questions, waiting for the answer, and then someone sees it and jumps off of that. So keep your questions, jot them down, and we promise to answer them. I know some of you um, emailed me during the break. That's great. You've been starting things, skill surveys, registering. So that's wonderful. And I am available if I'm not on one of these sessions, and I will get back to you quickly. So this morning we talked about entry points and access skills. We looked at a skill survey. We looked at how to set that up in the Forms and Graphs program. And when we ended, we were talking about the measurable outcome, how to select it, and how to be careful when you're looking at those entry points. So now we're going to get into the data charts and brief descriptions. So the data charts are required for the ELA language, reading, and math. Remember, that's what we were talking about in all of this, that we have two separate um, sessions for one for ELA and one for science. So you have a choice of data charts. It can be a line graph, a bar graph, or what we call a field data chart. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. What you need on that data chart is the student's name, the learning standard, which is always at the student's grade level. We don't spend a lot of time talking about that. Kevin showed you where to find it, how to click on it, and how to get it into the forms and graphs. But we're always going to start with the student's grade level learning standard. And then we're not going to think about it again. It doesn't have to align exactly with our entry point. We're going to choose our entry point, our access skill, and create our measurable outcome. So the measurable outcome is on the data chart. You're going to have 8 dates. So you'll have 8 data points, and those dates should be different and when school is in session. Each of those data points will have accuracy and independence for the responses on each date. And also, there's a place for a brief description beneath each of those dates. You're going to tell us what the student was asked to do, and that's going to be based on the skill in the measurable outcome. Remember that t-shirt? You're going to do what you said you're going to do. And then how did you do it? So that'll reflect the instructional approaches or formats where possible. And don't forget, here's our educator's manual up here on the top, and it tells you what page in case you forget. So let's take a look at it. This is Alex Keaton's graph. This is a bar graph, and you can see that we have the student's name up there. Remember, this is all going to be filled in with using the forms and graphs. There's our learning standard number all set for you that you chose. Alex's measurable outcome, percent accuracy and independence, and you can see that these are in color. However, you do not have to print them in color. It's just helpful when you're looking at it to see which one's accuracy and which one's independence, but don't worry about printing them in color. And then you'll see that there's a place for a minimum of 8 different dates on the graph. We always encourage you to do a couple extra just in case something is not quite right or we don't have enough information in some of those data brief descriptions. So it's always better to do a couple more if you can, but sometimes you can't, and you're going to need a minimum of 8 different dates. And there's our brief descriptions of how each activity was done, explaining what they did and how they did it. So here's a line graph. It's exactly the same idea as the bar graph. Some people prefer the line, some prefer the bar. That is your choice. There isn't one that we tell you to use. It is your choice which format you like. Sometimes it's easier if you're sharing with parents, perhaps, to use a bar graph, but again, your choice. And this is what we call a field data chart. Now, this one's a little bit different. You can see that there's a key to the symbols that we're using. So a plus is accurate, or a minus, or excuse me, or a minus, right? So it's either plus, it's accurate, or minus, it's not. And then it's either I for independent or P for prompted. And this one is different because it takes the response by response data collection. You see that? And so each of those trials, you are able to say whether the student was accurate or independent or prompted. So that's a response by response data collection, a little bit different. And the way the program works, and Kevin will show us in a bit, is that it will calculate that for you, so you don't have to worry about figuring it out. And then, of course, you still have your brief descriptions and your dates on there. So the bar or line graph summarizes a task like a worksheet that you would do. Where the field data chart, you might work with a student using access skills because you want to see how they do for each trial. And maybe that's going to give you more information that you need going forward for instruction. One thing you do not want to do is you do not want to start your data chart at 80 to 100% in both accuracy and independence. Someone had asked earlier about errorless teaching. That would be fine. So it would be 100% accurate, but then your independence would be very low if that's what you were working on. That's fine, but you don't want it to look like this. As you can see from this one, the student didn't learn anything new, so don't waste your time or the student's time, and this will not be scored if you do that. If this is a blip, if this is like one of those lucky, the student made a lucky guess, don't use it. If you go to do it the same skill the next day and they don't have it and you're sure they don't have it, don't use that data point. Don't even put it on, okay? The other thing we don't want to see are data points that reflect 0, 0. What did the student do? They didn't do anything. If they were 0% accurate and 0% independent, it was probably a behavior issue. Maybe they were having a bad day. So don't put it on the data chart. We need 8 dates, a minimum of 8 dates that show us what the student did. And this is what we're talking about. Now we're going to get into the brief descriptions, primary evidence. I'm sure many of you want to know how to calculate the independence. We'll do accuracy and independence, but independence is usually the trickier one. And self-eval, and of course, when these are due. So the purpose of the brief descriptions. So we only ask for 2 pieces of primary evidence that you're going to give us that the student completed. And we'll talk about other ways to get evidence. But for those 8 dates, or maybe 10 dates, we want to know how you're doing that skill. So we're just asking for a little window into your classroom. How are you teaching that skill? So it's going to reflect the same skill that you chose, the one that's in the measurable outcome. And then you're going to tell us how you did it. Was it a small group or a game format, or was it using a computer, or any of those, anything that would tell us the instructional method or an approach or the kind of material that was used. The how is also considered generalized performance. I don't typically talk about scoring areas, but I want to just let you know that is an area that is scored when you get your feedback form back. And all generalized performance is basically differentiating that instruction. Okay, so if you do maybe a worksheet and then perhaps the interactive whiteboard, well, there you have two different types of generalized performance. So don't get too hung up on it. Just know that that's what your how is doing. So these brief descriptions, again, remember you're going to do what was in the measurable outcome. You want to tell us what it was, and I said be careful of those verbs. So when you're explaining what you're doing, you want to use verbs that are synonymous with the verb in the measurable outcome. So perhaps your measurable outcome says to identify, then you'll be able to use verbs like label, name, point to. Doesn't have to be the exact same verb, but it has to convey the same message. So there's sort. I won't read these all to you. You can see all the different ways in which you can express that same verb. What I do want to remind you of is that identify is not the same as describe. Okay, so just remember that when you're looking at these verbs, that you want to make sure that if your student is only matching, don't choose an entry point that has describe. Okay, you want to identify, then they can label, they can name, they can point, right? So let's take a look at an example. So the measurable outcome here is the student will represent from a survey graphically with 80% accuracy and 100% independence. So you can see the skill right here in red, right? That's my measurable outcome. That's what I'm going to do for those 8 dates in various ways on different days, but that's what I'm going to do. So one of my brief descriptions says the student displayed data from a class survey on a bar graph by coloring in the correct categories. So do you see the what in red? They displayed data from a class survey on a bar graph. Is that the same as representing data from a survey graphically? Yes. And then how did they do it? They colored in the correct categories. So if you could picture having two different color highlighters when you write out your brief descriptions, and you colored one in yellow and one in blue, you should have both colors each time. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that. I just want you to picture that in your mind. If I was to say to you, oh, can you just go through and highlight all the what's, which would be the skill, and then how did you do it? And then that would be a different color. So just think that way when you fill out those brief descriptions. What I want to maybe call a highlightable moment is include only the skill listed in the measurable outcome in that brief description, because that's what we're taking the data on. In this case, we want to represent data from a survey graphically. That's what we're doing. So down below, we talked about displaying a data from a class survey. We didn't say anything about the student collecting the data on a class survey and any more information than was asked for. We're going to stick to what we were asked, what we chose in that measurable outcome. So only include the skill in the measurable outcome in that brief description. A little bit different for the ELA reading strand. You still want the what and how, but we also want to ask for the title of the text that you're using. So you are going to choose either literature or informational text. Whatever you decide is what you're going to use for that whole strand. You are not going to mix literary and informational text. So if you do a lot of science or maybe social studies and you're reading a lot of factual books, you might want to do informational text. If you want to do literary, if you do a lot of reading, maybe after the kids get back from recess and you do a lot of the literature, but certainly it's your choice, but you're only going to choose one. So whatever you choose to read, and you may read it to them, or if they can read, that's great, but you're going to put that title into the strand. Now, Kevin will show you in a moment where this all goes, and you are the recipient of his excellent work in giving you more space. However, if you do run out of space, you can always write the name of it, of the text underneath the brief descriptions. If the title is unclear, if we can't tell if tornadoes is a informational text or a literary text, then all we ask for is a small sample of the text. Please, please do not send your entire A to Z collection in the binder. It is not necessary, and you don't have those books once you send them because now they're in our storage until next fall. But here's an example of what you can do. You can scan them. Most copiers now have a scanning feature. You can put it on a flash drive and include that in the binder. But what you want to do is under each of those dates, you want to say see attached or see the flash drive, and make sure that each of your samples have the date. They correspond with the date on your data chart. You can open a Word or a PDF and capture it as a screenshot. You can print out just a small amount of text and include it in the binder, but just be sure that you have those dates up there for us so that we can see which ones go with which ones. All right, now we're going to see how well I described all of this information. We're going to do an activity. I'm going to read the measurable outcome and then the brief description, and then you're going to decide if this is an acceptable brief description based on everything we just discussed about brief descriptions. All right, so let's see who's paying attention. First one. Are you ready, Kev? Larry will describe the central message of a literary text with 80% accuracy and 100% independence. Larry answered 4 questions about the main idea. So for number 1, is that acceptable or not acceptable? Oh, great. Most of you participated. Thank you so much. So the majority of you said not acceptable. That is correct. And let's see why. So the brief description said that Larry answered 4 questions about the main idea. But what did we choose for our skill? He was supposed to describe the central message of a literary text. Do you see a title in there anywhere? No. All right, nice job. So let's move on to number 2. Pasquale will identify the value of U.S. coins with 80% accuracy and 100% independence. In my brief description, I wrote that Pasquale sorted nickels, dimes, pennies, and quarters. Is that acceptable or not acceptable? All right, so the majority of you said it was not acceptable, and that is correct. Why isn't it acceptable? We wanted to identify the value of the US coins. And what did Pasquale do? He just sorted them. Nickels, dimes, pennies, and quarters. Just sorted them. He did not identify the value of them. Okay. All right, let's see. Next one. Sophia will demonstrate the meaning of a newly created compound word with 80% accuracy and 100% independence. So this would be under language, under vocabulary acquisition. The brief description says that Sophia put puzzle pieces together to create compound words, such as butter plus fly. Acceptable or not acceptable? All right, so again, the majority, I don't want to end it yet. People are still doing it. The majority of you said that it was not acceptable, but we had a good amount think it was acceptable. It is a little tricky. That's why I did mention that it's ELA language, and language is all about vocabulary acquisition. So it isn't just putting puzzle pieces together. We want to show some meaning. Remember that Sophia was going to demonstrate meaning of that newly created word, compound word. All right. So she put the puzzle piece together, but maybe they fit. We don't know if she actually knew that a butter plus fly was a butterfly. So that is a little tricky. But last one, you're doing great. Ye will solve one or two-step equations involving multiplication and or division with 80% accuracy and 100% independence. But my brief description says, Ye accurately completed 8 out of 10 on IXL during morning group with Miss Sue. No prompting was needed. It was a good day. So, was ye acceptable or not acceptable? So the majority of you said, 81%, said that it was not acceptable. So let's make sure we know why it was not acceptable, because it was not acceptable. That is the correct answer. Ye was supposed to solve one or two-step equations involving multiplication or division. All that was written was that she completed 8 out of 10 problems on IXL. Now, some of you know IXL maybe because you use that program, but think about the people that are going to be reading this. You want to make sure that you're clear in some of the acronyms that we as teachers use quite frequently. So if you're using IXL, you could just put in parentheses computer program. And it was done during morning group with Miss Sue. Is that important to this? No. And everybody loves Miss Sue, but we don't really care in this case. What about the fact that no prompting was needed? Where are we going to find that? Right? Remember, we have accuracy and independence on our data chart, so we don't need to write anything about prompting there. And I'm glad it was a good day, but you don't need to write that. So keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it directly to what the student did and how they did it. And if the student has a very, very long name, you don't have to use it. You do not have to rewrite the student's name in the brief description every time. You can if you have room, but it isn't required. You can also abbreviate it if you want, if that helps. Nice job, everybody. Thank you so much for participating. Makes a difference. So now we're going to talk about the evidence. So we've talked about the measurable outcome, which is the entry point or access skill. Then we did the data charts, brief descriptions, and now we're moving on to primary evidence. Remember that each Each strand will have the student's work, at least 2 pieces of work. For the data chart, not every data point on that data chart has to be a piece of paper. So say you're doing something at the interactive whiteboard and you have the student that you're assessing come up to the board maybe 3 or 4 times. He gets 3 or 4 turns. You can collect the accuracy and independence on that and make it a data point. It doesn't have to be a piece of paper. If, however, you do a work sample, a worksheet of some form, then you can have that on the data chart and hand it in so that you don't, so you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone. You have a data point and you have a piece of evidence to give us. So this is Alex Keaton, and we're going to have the student's name. And then, Kev, I think I need you to do the date. So this is when you can collect data on these dates from 7/1, so July 1st of this year, 2023, all the way to March. Well, I'll say March 28th, 24. That's when they're due, but otherwise, I hope you're not running after the UPS truck. For science, and we'll talk about this more when you're at our science meeting if you're in grades 5, 8, or high school, but that can be done over 2 years. That can be a current school year and one previous year. It might not be so helpful for you this year because you're just finding that out. But if you have fourth graders or seventh graders or ninth graders, you might want to think about it. Okay, so 7/1/22 to 3/28/24 is for science only. And again, I'm going to just reiterate that all the classroom work, all your data points must be when school is in session. So not weekends or holidays, school vacations. That's why we ask for your calendar and also some of your residential programs. And so you want to let us know that so we know when you're in school, because many of you in residential programs do sometimes during our vacation days. So, Kev, if you can go back to the calendar, thank you. Also, we want to talk about on this work sample, you're going to have the accuracy and independence. So that's what it'll look like for Alex. This is a work sample description that goes with the evidence. By having this work sample description, you don't forget to put anything on the actual piece of evidence. Also, we have the brief description on here, and you'll have a little more room to be a little more verbose about what you did. And you can see here self-evaluation. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but just know it's here, and Kevin will also point that out when we go to forms and graphs. So here's the actual student evidence. This is produced by the student. The student cut and paste the numbers on there. We looked at how he did it. And so here is the actual evidence. Now, the student's name, accuracy and independence is on there, the date, everything is on here. So if there was not a work sample description, we could find it. But I'm telling you, it's much easier to have that description label so that you don't forget to put any of that important information. You can see here, I'm just going to point this out, that the teacher put a P next to the ones that were prompted. Sometimes that's helpful, and we'll talk about that more in accuracy and independence. So here's the second piece of primary evidence. So this has everything we just talked about, only it describes another worksheet that was done. Sometimes in math, it's easier to do the worksheets and hand them in. Sometimes you can do a screenshot. We'll talk about other ways in which you can capture evidence, but the worksheets are usually what we end up with for math. So this was produced by the student, has the name, date, accuracy, and independence on it. So that's just what we need. Sometimes, though, we talk about having an interactive whiteboard. You can use a photograph. So in this case, excuse me, the entry point says to compare the traits of main characters in a literary text. So Jamal orally identified character traits from Charlotte's Web, and the teacher wrote the responses in an oversized Venn diagram. So we want to make sure if you're going to use something like this where you took the picture because it was too big, obviously can't put a whiteboard in the binder, right? So if it's too big or it's temporary or if it's a science experiment and it's stinky, don't put it in the binder, take a picture. But we must see the end product of the instruction. So in this case, here's the end product. We can see what the teacher wrote for the student. Accuracy and independence is on it, the student's name and the date. You can also do a sequence of steps if that helps leading up to that final product. Sometimes that's very helpful. You want to make sure that the accuracy and independence agrees with what we see in the photograph. So here's a photograph. The student will match an action word to its corresponding picture. It is, what do you think? Do you think that's hard to see? Can you see the final evidence? Does it show the image and the final product? I can see the word there, skating, but there's a couple of pictures there. It's hard to see. And also what you can't see is down here is that accuracy is 88% and the independence is 53%, but there's only one trial here. So this would have been much better as supporting documentation than a final product. It would not have gone as a final product. We couldn't have accepted it as a final product, but it might have been great for helping us as supporting documentation, just showing the context of it. Sometimes what works better is a teacher documented work sample. So a teacher documented work sample is a lot of times used for students who are unable to produce actual written work. And what this does is describe the activity that the student's doing. So in this case, and it doesn't, a teacher documented work sample does not have to look exactly like this, but it should have the same information. So we want to know what the student was working on. So in this case, it was a student working at access skill level, and their job was to turn on technology used to demonstrate ratio and proportional relationships by pressing a switch to turn the page of a teacher-made story on the computer about ratios and proportional relationships. The student needed to turn that technology on within 15 seconds of a directive. So that's a lot of information in that measurable outcome. The brief description tells us that during a math session, the student turned on technology by pressing a switch and did it within 15 seconds and did turn the page of the book. So we can see the number of trials that were here. They did 9. You can see that the teacher gave us the page number. They also, this is all at the same time, right? They did this all in the same setting. And then whether or not they activated it within the 15 seconds. And here's the latency in seconds. And that's information for the teacher. That really helps them know what they need to do to help that student. You know, is it maybe a positioning of the access switch? But that's good information. And then here's the skill that was done during a standards-based activity. So this was ratio and proportional relationships for a grade 7 student. And so they were doing this book about for every pig, there was one tail. And then in this column, you have accuracy and independence. And at the bottom, it is calculated for us. 67% accurate and 89% independence. This is a beautifully done teacher documented work sample. we know exactly what happened and exactly what that student was asked to do and what they did. It's a very helpful way to turn in this information for a student who isn't going to give us something that they can produce. So you want to make sure that it's a series of trials that are conducted on the same day. It gives us more information than just one of those field data chart days, one data point. You want to make sure it's more information than that. You want to specifically describe the materials and that the context of the activity, and be sure that you're collecting accuracy and independence on each of those trials. And for your sake, you want to get that information. You want to have that so it can help you inform your instruction going forward. And it's going to be labeled just like anything else. We have name, date, accuracy, and independence. And so that's the kind of information that's always needed on our evidence. Again, if you have a student that you believe is an access skills student, please sign up to come on the 16th and also Wednesday. If you're coming to ELA, our last hour is going to be dedicated to ELA writing for students using access skills. So you get a break from me, and you're going to get to hear Kevin talk about the digital evidence that we accept and how it can be submitted. So I'll turn it over to Kevin, and I'll see you in a minute.
Thank you, Deb. So hello again, everybody. So I'll quickly talk about what's on the screen now about digital evidence, and then we'll dive back into forms and graphs, and we can go over how to create those data charts and the description labels that Deb just ran through with you. But as far as digital evidence, what I mean by that is it essentially is still a binder that you're submitting of the required forms and the evidence that you've collected. But not in every case do you have to print out that evidence. If you've got worksheets that the student has created, then that's an easy one to just attach. But let's say you've got that whiteboard that you took a picture of. You could print that out and put it in a piece of paper, but you can also just give us that file. So put it on a flash drive. Occasionally we still see CDs, DVDs, but mostly everything's on a flash drive. So just put that picture on there. You can also do, we don't see a ton of it, but any of the Microsoft Office things. So people have created PowerPoints of series of trials that are each on a slide and given us the PowerPoint file, and we can open those up and just watch them as we review the rest of the materials. Word documents, you could insert images or work directly in Word, or a student might actually be doing things in Word. That's fine too. What you don't want to do, every now and then somebody will give us a link to a Google Classroom, thinking we can do something. It's all password protected. We try, we'll click on it to see what happens, but most of the time we can't access that. So nothing linked somewhere else. You need to be able to access it directly from reviewing the binder itself. And with those flash drives, the thing to remember too is you might have 6 kids that you're doing assessments for, and a flash drive that can hold 56 gigabytes or some huge amount. You can't put them all on one flash drive and throw it in the box and wave goodbyes. UPS drives them all away, because when these are scored, the first thing that happens when they come in is they're logged in and then they're spiraled. So all those portfolios from your school go into different boxes. They're scored at different times amongst different scores, different tables. So if you only have one flash drive, obviously it's not going to be in every box. So you have to make sure that the flash drive is only that student in that binder if you're going to submit the digital evidence. With videos, we don't see a ton of videos. The main reason being is really hard to show that final product, the fantastic supporting evidence. But if you just throw a camera up or a phone on a tripod and videotape an activity, particularly like a classroom-based activity, really hard to see what that final product is of either the series of trials or that final creation of what they did. Sometimes you can do it, but they are They are tricky, but great for supporting. But if you do videos, few tips on that. Keep it under 3 minutes. They won't watch anything more than that. So don't give us a full classroom activity of 45 minutes. 3 minutes is the cap. And it helps if you name the video files, at least the strand, maybe the student and the strand, rather than keeping the generic numbers and letters that gets created when you take a video. So just ELA Damien, and then put it on a flash drive. And then it's easier, like ELA language, ELA reading. Then when it's reviewed, the scorer can find it. And it also makes sure you put the right file on there. We've had some interesting files show up, nothing scandalous. We've seen some, what I assume are personal children's birthday parties, pictures and things that I've seen over the years of clearly didn't mean to put that file on there, but because it was generically named, they just thought it was one thing, but it was something else on their phone. So just if you rename them and save them, then it's a nice little flag for you. So now let's dive back into forms and graphs and we'll take a look. We'll catch up with Alex Keaton again and look to see how to do the data charts and other forms that Deb had just mentioned. One moment and I'll switch on over. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Took its sweet time, but we found our way back to forms and graphs. So just a reminder, if you haven't created an account, make sure the first thing you do is hop on in and do the registration page, give it your email, choose a password, and you'll be in. But we're going to catch up right where we left off with Alex. I'm going to sign in. It'll take me my student list, and there's Alex. Remember, we did the skill survey already. Strand cover sheet, or excuse me, MCAS-Alt cover sheet is where we did that high-level demographic of teacher name, school, and all that. But where you'll go most of the time after you've done your skill surveys is right into the strand cover sheet list. Here's that strand we built out and chose a entry point to create a measurable outcome for this morning, the base 10 in math, number and operations. Go to cover sheet. And we've taken care of most of the top half here. We chose a learning standard. Remember our friend, the big red button, click that and it will put in the learning standard text for you. Level of complexity, we got by choosing an entry point. And remember, we can click find entry points and we get that interactive where we can go higher or lower across the grade spans to find a meaningful skill for our student. So we know that Alex is rounding whole numbers to the nearest 100 using place value is the skill we chose. 6, we don't talk a whole lot about this. You don't have to do number 6. It's here for you to just sort of give a little background information if you find that it would be helpful of information you'd like to give to somebody reviewing this about if it's not super clear an accommodation or a system AAC device or some other modification that if you couldn't really tell just by looking at it and you want to make it known that that's something that the student is using or an approach that you use that isn't evident just reading the brief descriptions or looking at the evidence, you can capture that in 6. It's just a big text box that you can type in right here. But then we get down below. So this, the bottom half of this page is where you can create the field data charts, the bar graphs, line graphs, and the work description labels. Alex sample that Deb was looking at in the PowerPoint had there's the skill survey, had a bar graph. So that's what we're going to create. I'll show you how to do the bar graph and know if you prefer a line graph, they're identical in their function of how you create them. Just one will give you bars and one will give you lines for the final graph. Some people just like the visual representation of seeing trends one way or the other, but no, they're identical. It's just about what they're named and the final product that you get. But what we're going to look at in just a second for a bar graph, all of it applies to the line graph as well. How you begin, click on what it is you want to create. We want a bar graph, so we'll click bar graph. It tells us what type of evidence we created. This my description, I'll show you in just a second where that comes from. We'll skip that for now, but to go to the evidence page, you click here. This X, remember earlier this morning, I said we're not cruel, we don't delete a whole student, but if you delete individual evidence, so if I click this and got rid of that bar graph, it'll ask me, Are you sure you want to delete this? And we don't have anything in there, but it doesn't care. We could have had 10 full dates of information all filled out. As soon as I say okay, it is gone forever. It has deleted it from the database to make room for whatever you're going to replace it with. So make sure you mean to delete it. It's okay to just leave stuff hanging out there too, because you're ultimately printing it out and putting it in. So just because it's there doesn't mean it's going to be reviewed or scored. You're ultimately in control of what you print out. So when in doubt, just don't delete it. But you can, but just know when you do delete it, it is gone. There's no bringing it back. So let's drop a new one in. This time we're going to go to evidence page. And this my description, it's not super helpful if I'm honest with the bar graph or line graph or any of the graphs because it's a 1-to-1. You're only doing one graph for a strand. So it doesn't help a lot, but you'll see when we do the work description labels, this just leaves yourself a little breadcrumb trail that when I go back to the strand cover sheet, now when I look at that bar graph, whatever I type in that little yellow box will show up here. So if you've got 2 or 3 work description labels, you can put a date on them. You can say, this is the snowman activity. It's there for you so that you don't have to keep opening and closing a bunch when you've got multiple versions in it. It'll make a little more sense when we see it with the work description labels. But just know that that's where that's pulling it from is, oops, sorry. Each one of these pieces of evidence always has this little my description, this yellow box. That's its purpose, is just to put it back on that sheet so you know what's what. But as we work down this form, everything we've done, it is pulled over. It's got the learning standard we selected, the measurable outcome. Notice I cannot change this measurable outcome. It's just text. I can highlight it and try to type over it all I want. It is not going to change because you cannot mix and match the skills. You don't want to do your data chart on one skill that you chose for measurable outcome in an entry point and then do a piece of evidence and change it to a new one and do another piece of evidence on a third one. Every single thing in that strand has to align to this same measurable outcome. So you cannot change it. Once you select it, it will just automatically populate on everything you create and keep it the same for you. But how you actually create the data, so we've got 10 different slots to put in up to 10 different dates. Remember, the minimum is 8, but we give you up to 10. Every now and then, just either you might have forgot to put an accuracy and independence, or a description just doesn't clearly show the what and how. If one gets thrown off, it's always nice to have a backup of either 8th or a 10th so that you have that core set of at least 8 different dates with accuracy, independence, and brief descriptions that say what happened and how they did it. And how you populate that is you click edit on the line you want to do data. We see in Alex's, his first data point was on 10/4/23. In this case, he was 0% accurate and 100% independence. Totally fine. It's okay that 1-0. What you don't want is 0-0 or both of these above 80. So if this was 90% accuracy and 100% independence on that first data point, you can't do that. It has to be below 80 for the first data point in at least one of these. So 0 is below 80, so that is okay. And then on the brief description, I'm not going to type the whole thing, but you get the idea. It is just a text box. It'll give you up to 200 characters that it'll allow in there and help you count down as you type. So this is where you don't have to put the student name. Some people just say student. You can leave it out altogether because the name is always going to be at the top. We know this is Alex's data chart. You don't have to keep saying Alex, 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 Alex in every single data point. Sentence fragments are fine. You don't have to say full sentence. You just want to, as clearly and efficiently as you can, tell us what did the student do and how did they do it. That's the whole point in the brief description. But you're just typing through. So the full one is rounding worksheet with 5 3-digit numbers was given to Alex. He was asked to round to the nearest 100. You can see what he did and how he did it. We'll plop in one more just so you can see a couple different days. So you can save, but if you just activate a new line, it'll lock in and save behind you. So number 2. And then this one was on 10/6/23, and now he was 100% accurate and 50% independent. And another brief description. And then you might be asking, that's great, but where does the actual graph come from? So at the top, you can save. It'll save behind you in a lot of cases, but particularly when you're going to print something, I generally save everything there. You can print the graph by itself. I'll show you once we kind of complete this strand a little bit more, how you can print it all in one shot. But if I do printer friendly, it's going to give me a little nudge to say this looks better landscape instead of portrait, which is the default most of the time. So wide, not tall. That's a setting of the actual printer you're sending it to, so we can't set it for you here. But then you'll get the bar graph once you say okay. It's actually just one big picture that it stitches together, but you can see our accuracy and independence, our two groupings, and then our brief descriptions here at the bottom. So that's what generates the actual graph, and it just opens up in a new tab for you. So that's the bar graph. As I mentioned, line graph, the page looks identical, just says line graph here, up until you click to print. Everything is the same. You just get lines instead of bars. So pretty self-explanatory. If you understand the bar graph, the line graph is the exact same. The one different one that I'll show you is the field data chart, because it is a different product, so it's handled a little bit differently when you're creating it. So let's go back to our strand cover sheet. And you would never do this in reality. You wouldn't have a bar graph and then a field data chart. It's always one of these three. So you don't mix them. You can't have a bar graph and a line graph and consider one a piece of evidence. Only one graph that summarizes the data. But I'll do it and then I'll delete it out. But I want you to see how you create the field data chart, particularly if you're working with Access skills. They tend to be used a little bit more frequently. So same approach, click on field data chart, go to evidence. The top looks pretty much the same. It's carried over everything it knows, but then it takes a bit of a turn. So it's a whole bunch of prompting for different data entry across up to 10 different days. So in each given day, there's a series of trial where you can denote the accuracy and the independence for each of the trials. So how you populate this, it's a date plus accurate minus not accurate. So you're accurate, you're an independent, accurate, prompted this trial, inaccurate, prompted again. And lather, rinse, repeat for as many trials as you have. You don't have to delete them out. It won't include them if they're just n, only if you've populated in. And then again, another place, same, what did they do? How did they do it? What was this series of trials capturing is what you would put in the brief description. Still have to do at least 8 dates. That doesn't change. So 8 different sets of trials across 8 different dates. But now when I save this and print it, for however many dates I put, it'll put them together, do the math for me for the accuracy and independence, and then my brief description across up to 10 days. So a little bit different, but the same basic concept of data entry across at least 8 different dates, and then you can save it and print it to create either one of those types of graph, bar, /line, or field data chart. So let's get back to our strand cover sheet. We're going to stick with my bar graph. I'm going to delete out that data chart field. And now we have work description and video description. So if you do have a video clip that you're putting in, just know it works exactly the same. I'll drop one in, and then we'll really fill out a work description label. The only difference is when I do a video description, all this information will be captured on the standard. The only difference is it's asking for the title of the video that you're putting in. This is where it's helpful to say like ELA language, Damien or whatever you've named it. You can just put that's a little extreme example, but the standard file and just some link to say, okay, this is the one that's supposed to be viewed for the number and operations base 10. This little gray box is the only difference to what we're about to look at. But most of you are just going to do the standard work description label. So let's take a look at that in a little more in depth. So click work description label, and then go to evidence page. And I think this is the place that the little my description can be helpful if you do 2, 3 work description labels, because you can give yourself a little hint about what this is, and then the rest of it is just data entry. So I'm scrolling down to Alex's first sample. We see that this took place on 10/17/23. And then you're populating of the evidence that you're attaching to this. What was the accuracy? It's 100% accurate, and it was 73% independent. Self-evaluation, I'll mention this, but Deb in a little bit will go into a little more depth about what self-evaluation actually is. So it's here just because you can say how it happened. So this is how did the student feel about their work? What was their personal evaluation, a choice that they made? So it can be the student felt that this was extremely difficult, the student liked this a lot, and you can just type how it occurred here. Deb will show you there's no one way to do self-evaluation, but Deb will show you that what a lot of people do is they've got a standard self-evaluation sheet where after they're done with an activity, they can give it to the student and they can reflect on how they did. They can circle, this was hard, I'd like this a lot. So they use it repeatedly. And what we see a lot is people just say, see attached. And then they put that in with the actual evidence, and the reviewer just knows that, oh, okay, so I probably got one of those standalone self-evals. I'll go looking for it in this strand. But Deb will come back to that. It'll make a little more sense when Deb explains how to address self-evaluation, but just know that's why that's there. And then more briefly described. So this is just what is it that you're attaching this to? What did they do? How did they do it? Pretty big box here, 500 characters. You can be much more descriptive if needed of what it is that you're attaching, using this label to attach to. Same sort of thing. You can save this and print, but I'll show you in just a second how you can print them all in one go. But let's just do one more quick one just so you see. So notice now I have that rounding roundup. As soon as I put in another work description, they're just generically named work description label. So if you leave that little breadcrumb for yourself, it's just when you come back to this, you know, okay, if I need to continue filling out or do a brief description on that roundup one, I can go here. So you don't have to just keep hunting, hoping you get the right one. It's just there for you to know which is which without having to open it. So let's quickly go here. Robots. The second sample. Bear with me, I'm just scrolling down in the sample I have off on another screen. So this one for Alex, 10/19, 23, it's 100% accurate. This time 78%. And then your description. So not a whole lot to do. So the whole intent of this work sample description label is you're attaching this to the evidence. So it gives you all of those required elements. You can also put them on the evidence, but if you use this and you fill it out completely, you know they're there. You know you've got student name, you know you have date and accuracy and independence. A lot of people also put it on the actual evidence, and that's great. You can have it multiple places, but using these just ensures, as long as you've filled it out completely, that it's a easy check off of all the requirements of submitting the evidence. So let's save this and go back to our strand cover sheet. And now we see so this represents the minimum, right? So what is the requirement for a strand? We need a strand cover sheet. We've done that. We've already done the skill survey, and I'll show you how it pulls that in just a second. And then we've got a data chart and 2 pieces of evidence. So this is the core set. So strand cover sheet, skill survey, data chart, and two pieces of evidence all aligned to the same measurable outcome. So this is a math, number, and operation space 10. If we were doing a ELA language, other than the skill changing, same thing, same requirements. It would look exactly the same, just the content wraps around this structure. So when you're ready to stitch this all together and marry it up with the evidence to put it in the binder, when you print from the strand cover sheet, notice it doesn't say printer friendly, it says print options. This morning, we generated just the strand cover sheet. Remember when it prompted us to replace those XX accuracy and XX independence in our measurable outcome? But you can print multiple forms. So when I click this, this is below is giving you a heads up of what it'll do. It'll give you the strand cover sheet, look back, grab the skill survey for you. It'll automatically generate up to 5 work labels. So if you do 5 below, the first 5 that it sees, it'll stitch in here for you. And then you should never really need more than that. So remember, 2 is the minimum. 3 is recommended. 4 is starting to push it, and then 5 is probably too much. And you don't have to. That comes up a lot too, where maybe somebody's already asked in the comments, does every data point on the data chart do I submit a piece of evidence for that? Absolutely no. Do not do that. You don't have to. Just 2. And the 2 pieces don't even have to be on the data chart. They certainly can be. I don't know why you would create something that's not on the data chart, but you could. If you've got this perfect sample and it's just not on the data chart and you want to submit it, great. It doesn't matter if it is or isn't on the data chart. Just a data chart with 10 or up to 8 dates, at least 8 dates, and then at least 2 pieces of evidence. But when I click print multiple, ignore this at the top. We'll come back to that. So here's our string cover sheet. We'll keep scrolling. Put in the skill survey. Here's my work description 1 that we created for 1017. And then 1019 works description 2. So I can print this. It'll put page breaks everywhere that makes sense for it to have a page break. But to do the graph, so it didn't matter if we did a bar, line, or field data chart. Up here is where you can grab that graph. It can't stitch it in for technical reason that I won't get into. It can't just kind of place it after the skill survey. It has to be printed by itself. One other reason is that these all are landscape, and then if you print, so I clicked here to print, and it'll do a new tab for just the data chart that I created. So 2 clicks, and you'll get everything you need rather than printing them all individually. And again, if you didn't see where I clicked, it's just right here at the top of click here to print bar graph, and it'll just say whatever it is that you created, bar, line, or field. All works the same. So that's how you do the basics of what we're looking at. ELA writing and science are a little bit differently, which is why they've got their own separate trainings. So we'll go over those at those trainings of how to interact with those forms. But that's the formula. That's the requirement. One other question that comes up a lot is, well, what if I'm doing all the ELA and another teacher is doing the math? How do we handle that? So remember, everything is going to compile into a binder at the end. So there's 2 approaches. You could share an account. Not always the best idea. You have to both know the password, and theoretically, if you're both in it at the same time, sometimes if you just happen to find yourself on the same page for some reason, you can start finding saves with each other. Whoever clicks save last, that's what's going to be in there. The cleaner way is just both create an account, put the same student. Alex can live in 2 different teachers' accounts. It doesn't know or care. It won't prompt you to say this student already exists in another account, because it's just an open-ended system. One person does the ELA, one person does the math, and you stitch it together in the end for the final submission. That's the cleaner way. That's how most people do it. But certainly totally acceptable to have multiple people kind of contributing different content to there. Somebody just needs to take the lead and put it all together in the end. So I know that's a lot, as we mentioned. This is being recorded. I'll put that link back in there for the materials that we kind of threw around a bunch of times this morning, where all those links will show up for the recording. But I always advocate, particularly this early in the year, make sure you can get in there, learn by doing, create a fake student, just click around, get the feel of creating skill surveys, choosing skills, and playing around with some of the data charts, and just get kind of the learning curve can be a little steep at first, so just play around and get the feel for it. So now I will give it back to Deb, and she will walk through the rest of the components of the strand, and then we can wrap up with some questions. So over to you, Deb.
Thanks, Kevin. That is a lot of information, but remember it is recorded and it'll be like a week to 10 days. It takes some time. We have to send it out to be professionally closed captioned and then we can post it. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time because, just because. So be patient with us. All right. So now we're going to talk about calculating accuracy and independence for the evidence. And I think that it's not so much the accuracy because it's either right or wrong, and for the entry points, but what we need is the independence. So we have Michael's piece of evidence here, and Michael's using idioms. And you can see I highlighted in that long rectangle there check marks, and those are supposed to be P's. The teacher's P's are a little different, but they're prompts. So I knew what she meant or he meant. And there's an X on number 4. So these are all the opportunities that the student had to demonstrate the measurable outcome. And so there were 7 correct responses out of the 8. So they were 88% accurate. We're looking for independence, so you can see that they were prompted 2 times. We don't care how they were prompted, whether it was physical, gestural, whatever it was a prompt. And a prompt is a prompt, and it's non-independent. So they were 6 out of 8 times independent or 75% independent. So let's dissect this a little bit more because I want you to include other people that are going to be working with your students. I know in my classroom there were times I had 4 and 5 paraprofessionals. Sometimes you have teacher volunteers. You have speech and language. You have OT, PT. So use the people that are helping you in your classroom. Just be sure that you're all on the same page. Make sure that they understand what an accommodation is, that it's not a prompt if you read to the student, or if you scribe for the student, or if the student uses a calculator. Make sure that you just say that is not a prompt, it is leveling the playing field. Even giving a directive or a cue, like pick up your pencil, show me you're ready to work. That's not a prompt. We're just getting them ready to work. A prompt is, it can be verbal, visual, physical, or gestural, but those are ways that gets the student closer to the answer. If you do hand over hand, that is always prompted response and considered non-independent. So sometimes you may show a student 3 choices. Sometimes you put them on the computer and it's a multiple choice. And then one of those answers disappears. That's a prompt. Sometimes you have people that are overly helpful and they may emphasize one choice over another. That's a prompt. So please make sure that so that you're all on the same page as to what a prompt is, that you find a way to put that either on the paper or on something for you to record it. You're going to need to have that information when you look at the worksheet, or even if it's not a worksheet and they're going up to the board, did you help them? How many times did you help them? So have something in place, a good system that works for everybody. One of the teacher consultants said they used to use a green dot. So she had a pen. If she helped the student, she would just put a green dot. And then when it was collected, they could tell which ones were prompted. So think of a way that you can create a system. Don't make it too complicated for you and for everyone else. Just make sure you're all on the same page so that your accuracy and independence is consistent throughout the different people that they'll be dealing with. So here's an example of how we're going to determine the accuracy and independence. For this one, we want to think about what is the outcome? What am I asking my student to do? In this case, it's going to be answering questions about a book that's read in class. That's the outcome that I'm looking for. I know which students I'm assessing for the alternate assessment. I know how many times I'm going to be able to ask that question. I'm going to give them as many opportunities to perform that skill. In this case, it's going to be orally. Sometimes it might be holding up a whiteboard or, um, writing it down, but you determine that. It's always better to have that idea first so that you're prepared. Then how many items are there going to be? So maybe you had 12 questions you were going to ask the whole class, but particularly this student or several students, you're going to ask them these 5 questions. And you're going to use the symbol for a plus for correct and a minus for incorrect, a P for a prompt, and an I for independence. So as you can see here, we've broken it down. There's our 5 questions. They were 3 out of 5 correct, so they were 60% accurate. They needed quite a bit of prompting. Only one time did they not need a prompt, so they were only 20% independent. And this would be good information to you. Why were they unable to answer that question orally? Those are good data for you to collect, but always making sure you're giving the students opportunities to perform the skill. Self-evaluation, and Kevin showed us where we can find that. Self-evaluation can be a way in which Alex can self-evaluate in the rounding robots. So this particular one is a sheet that this teacher used probably for all the activities because it says the activity I completed today was called, and it was called rounding robots, but you could use it in any subject. And you can see that the student was able to circle their answers. I think that I did my best work. One new thing I learned, that's always great. But sometimes you don't have students that are able to fill out something like that. So we got to think about how they can make choices, how they can think about their work. They can reflect on it. How did they do? Did they need help? This is a really good one, is selecting the work for their binder. It definitely instills that ownership. This is what I want to show the scorers. Now, obviously, you're going to give the student a couple of choices that you would like in there, but it does help them to show off their work. Choosing the materials or the activities that they're going to do. Choosing which worksheet they want to do first. Setting their own goals for learning. That's a tricky one. That's usually a higher level thinking skill, but if you want to, certainly can try that. Using a graph that they can graph their own performance on a grid or a table. A checklist is always good, and it doesn't have to always be text. You can have icons, picture icons with the words so the student knows what they're checking off. That's always helpful to use. A rubric to help rate them. Self-correcting, and that we would only know that if you told us. But if you have a student that is not at that level, they can do things like sign all done, or if you're trying to get them to show that their work is finished, perhaps putting it in a bucket. That's how they show that they're done with the work. So you can think of ways that is at your students' level to reflect on the work that they just finished. Here's some examples from teachers. You can see a lot of them are Mayor Johnson symbols that they use. They use pictures and text, and sometimes the student is able to circle it. Sometimes I use a bingo dabber. The one up here with the three smiley or the three different faces, I did great, okay, not so good. Those were created on labels like Avery labels. The student the, the student just colored the one in, so the teacher wanted to remember to put that on the work. And can I please tell you to do the self-evaluation at the time that you finish the work? Don't give them a stack of self-evaluation papers in March to ask them what they did in October. It's not fair, it's not authentic, it's meaningless. You want them to start to think about, how did I do? Did I need help? Did I do great? And it's okay if they needed help, right? We want them to say it's okay. And also to be aware that I did need help. I did need to listen or pay attention to what the teacher said. So any of those things that can help our students reflect on their work. Here's two different kinds of teacher created examples. One of the students had a favorite TV show, The Big Bang Theory, and so they created a self-evaluation form that was motivating for this student. And the other one is it has text and it has yes, no, and it looks like it has some nice icons there to help them explain what they did. You can do whatever you want. You can use the same type of evaluation every time, or you can have them choose um, different things to put in their binder. It's up to you. You can use that little box that Kevin pointed out in the self-evaluation box that says, my student said, and you can quote them. And just an important reminder here, these are due on Thursday, March 28th, 2024. I know that seems like a long time, but most of you here are new. Do not put this off. Every single week, input your data. You need to do that. You need to have a system. You don't want to get behind. I promise you, I've been there, I've done it, and it isn't a good feeling to feel panicked in January. So start today or tomorrow, ask questions, know that we have a review session. Those wonderful training specialists that I told you that some of them are on this because they're listening to me and they're very patient people and they'll listen to you and help you review and answer any questions you have about your portfolio. Some of them may be in your district. So if any of the training specialists want to put their name and the district or the school that they're in, and you're welcome to, because perhaps there'll be somebody that you know. But just know that these need to be reviewed before they're sent in. So you want to be prepared to have your binder ready at least the week before. Don't wait till the last minute. It's very stressful and it's just too much pressure for you, especially if you're a new teacher. So plan it out so that you're completed at least the week before the end of this time. Okay. I will answer your questions. My email is on the final contact on the final page here, which I'll put up in a minute. But I will spend this next 5-6 minutes and we will answer your questions. I think the teacher consultants are already in the process of doing so. I think some of the questions may have been answered as Kevin was doing his work, but some I will answer live and some I will type in for you. So we already did September 29th. Our next writing is tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and the next science is tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Remember, it takes at least a week to 10 days to get these recordings up, so please give us a little bit of leeway with that. but they'll be there for you. The Educator's Manual is a wonderful, wonderful tool. So be sure to look at that. So these are the dates. I will answer the questions, and here is my email. All right. So let's see what we have here. Just trying to find one that our teacher consultant is not answering. So I think that Kevin answered this. I think I also said it the first part, but the evidence. So Amy's asking if the evidence can be part of those 8 data points. Yes, they can be. They don't have to be, but they can be. And why wouldn't you? If you're already doing it, you might as well use it. So that's a quick and easy one. So Celia wants to know if we collect evidence on a smartboard or non-paper work, do we still need to send something in besides the point on the data chart? So you are always going to give us 2 pieces of evidence. So those 8 data points do not have to be a piece of paper, but you have to send in something. So you may have 5 or 6 data points that are not a piece of paper, but you may have 2 or 3 that are a piece of paper. We always need a data chart and 2 pieces of actual evidence. So whether it's a worksheet or a photograph that we talked about, we have to have both of those. If you're doing ESY, it's a little bit late now unless someone has collected um, information. So the extended school year started in July. That is fine, but hopefully they collected something that you need. So ESY is probably better going forward than looking backwards, but you can, if it works, use it. Make sure that it matches the skill that you're collecting. So Katrina's asking if the 8 different dates are supposed to be taken from the beginning of the material being taught and then again at the end to demonstrate growth, or are the 8 dates what the student is reaching or approaching mastery? So remember, we don't want them to have mastered it. We want it to be a challenging skill. So your skill survey would pretty much tell you where you're going to start. I would pretty much start at the beginning when you first start teaching them. And you don't have to collect every single day, but you want to collect every couple of days, depending on what unit you're doing. So, say you're doing a geometry one and you're working on identifying shapes. Well, maybe that's only something you're going to do for a couple of weeks. So you want to collect it within that time frame and see how they do. And you can extend it. Certainly, it's your option to extend it. But something like reading or language, vocabulary, you're going to do that throughout the year. So make sure you pick something that is challenging and that you can develop and watch develop over the year. And with reading, you can certainly change the complexity of the text that you're reading. Even though the entry point might be answering comprehension questions, the complexity of the text might be increased. I hope that helps. Okay, Mike wants to know, would using data from IXL, Lexia work if the description is correct? Yes, it's fine to use those things. I'm not sure if Lexia would work, but if it matches the entry point, that's fine. You might want to check with me first just to be sure, but most likely, it's just a matter of showing that accuracy and independence. My point for that was that IXL, or sometimes some of the acronyms we use, we don't know what they are. I mean, some things I have used and some things other teacher consultants have used, but at scoring, you're not there to ask the question. So that was the main reason. But Lexia, it's been a while since I've used it, so it might have changed. You might want to just check that one. So access points for this Wednesday, the 4th, that is for the ELA access skills, and I'm going to do the writing at the first part, and then for the last hour, Laura is going to come in and do the access for writing. It wouldn't hurt you to be there for the whole thing, but if are limited for time and you only want to go to the access skill, you can come to the second part of it. So Jennifer, you can use an interactive um, a computer work as a data point. You can also use it as a work sample if you have the information that you need, like the one I showed with the screenshot. The student answered the question orally and the teacher put it on, and then they took a picture of the final product. You can do that. It might be a little trickier, but you can certainly do that. Can you use unique learning systems for the math? Yes, you can. As long as we have all the information and it matches and aligns with the entry point. We just want to make sure it aligns with the entry point. That has to be the biggest thing. It isn't the program you're using, it's documenting the correct skill. I know we're about 3 minutes over. I will continue to answer questions for you, but I will go offline. So if people have to leave, I don't want them to feel like they're missing something. I will answer any questions that are coming up. But if you're going to come, hopefully I'll see you Wednesday for the ELA writing. And then if you're doing science, I will see you for that as well. So thank you to our interpreters. Thank you to our teacher consultants and to our training specialists, and of course to all of you who took time out of your day to spend with us.